right, friends of the undead, we want to introduce you to the director and producer of the upcoming horror film Incest Death Squad, Cory Udler. We also have two of the stars, Melissa Murphy and Carmela Wiese. Thank you for joining us in the Bordello of Horror tonight.
First off, why don't you tell us what Incest Death Squad is about?
There's a loaded question. Incest Death Squad, when I initially wrote Incest Death Squad, honestly, and I apologize to anybody whose, politics are, leaning towards the right, but it was an indictment on the Bush administration and kind of the killing in the name of God. And actually now it's become, a little more, considering that, all these TV shows that are out there now with, I have 19 children. Well, how many children are you going to have? Well, it depends on how many God will allow me to have. That's just frightening as hell. So that's kind of what it is. It was an indictment on the Bush administration and everything that was going on at the time. And but basically, at the heart of it, it is 100% pure, filthy, exploitative horror cinema, which, a lot of, especially in Hollywood, nobody is doing anything that's really exploitative and true anymore. They're very well lit, flashy six-pack ab, perfect people being slaughtered by a crazy maniac in the woods, and this is not like that at all. This is, a little more gritty and a little more return to, 70s horror, which I'm a huge fan of 70s horror, and that's kind of the tone we're going for on this one. But it's about an incestual brother and sister combo who kill tourists in the name of God. That's it in a nutshell. And so if that sounds interesting, then of course Incest Death Squad's the movie for you.
That sounds interesting. How did you get the idea for the film?
Well, basically, the idea for the film came from everything that was going on at the time. I wrote it probably, 5.5 years ago. And it was shortly after 9/11 and everything had happened, and we, invaded Iraq, and with President Bush saying, everything was evildoers, and in the name of, he's talking to God. He's got like a pipeline to God. It just scared the hell out of me. So that was basically what, I wrote the script about, was just this whole self-righteous killing in the name of God. If you believe in my God, you're fine. But if you don't believe in my God, then it's fine for me to kill you and slaughter you and feed you to my pet bear. But that's basically what it is. So in a nutshell, that's really, what it was.
How did you get interested in the horror genre, and what is your background in filmmaking?
My background in filmmaking, I've actually been writing for probably, 6 years. The first film that I wrote was a little something called The Jitters, which has actually been through the ringer in Hollywood. A funny story, I wrote it for a company. I was going through a script editor at the time, and the script editor at the time was just telling me like format and things and wasn't helping me with the story. So I wrote it, sent it to the company, and then 2 weeks later I contacted the company and I said, how's, The Jitters going, in development? And they said, well, we're going into our philanthropy business now, so we're selling all of our assets. And I was like, oh my God. So it was the most unpleasant experience I'd ever had. So that's when I wrote Incest Death Squad. But as far as my background goes, I've written for Ted B. Michaels, who some people may know, I would hope everybody knows, from Astro Zombies and Corpse Grinders and things. So I've written a few movies there. I have a few movies that are in development with Full Moon Entertainment, and I forgot the question. So I think that was the question, right?
Also, your interest, where did you get the interest?
Oh, where to get the interest? My interest in horror came really early on. I don't know if anybody remembers, but kind of like Freakshow and you guys, I was a big fan of the horror hosts, and my #1 horror host was Captain. His name was Commander USA's, and he played Groovy Movies. So it was Commander USA's Groovy Movies, and it was on every Saturday. He played these terrible Mexican monster movies with like guys in garbage bags that had like googly eyes and like pipe cleaners for antenna. And that was where my interest in horror started. But then I really got big on zombie movies, but I never got really big on like 80s slasher movies. I was a bigger fan of, like 70s, these filthy, horrible movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and I Spit on Your Grave, and, even going, if anybody knows Water Power or Forced Entry, those were, big influences on what I did. So that's basically where my interest started, and I've kind of tried to carry on that tradition a little bit into Incest Death Squad.